I remember the day it all began so clearly. A quiet afternoon when I sat with an English grammar book open in front of me. The pages were filled with rules, definitions, and endless exercises I had repeated countless times before. My eyes scanned the words, but my heart felt heavy. I had knowledge. Yes, but no connection. I could pass exams, write the correct answers, and list irregular verbs on command. Yet when someone asked me to speak, I froze. The words I had memorized never arrived on my tongue. I felt like I was standing outside of English, looking in, unable to touch it. That was the moment a thought entered my mind and refused to leave. English was not in my life, it was only in my notebook. The realization was painful, almost embarrassing after so many years of study. But it was also freeing, for the first time. I saw the real problem. It wasn't English itself. It was the way I had been trying to learn it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of every hesitation came rushing back, the times I avoided conversations, the times I laughed nervously instead of answering, the times I had wished I could express myself but stayed silent. I recalled watching movies with subtitles, understanding the story yet never feeling the emotions because I was busy reading instead of listening. It struck me that I had been learning as if reading about swimming in a book, but never touching the water. That image stayed with me, and in the stillness of the night, a new idea whispered through my thoughts. What if I stopped treating English as a subject and started living with it as if it were a friend? The very next morning, I tested this fragile thought. Before even checking my phone, I whispered to myself, "Good morning, I'm ready to learn." The words were awkward, imperfect, yet strangely powerful for the first time. I didn't just think English, I felt it. I smiled at my reflection, surprised at the sense of possibility in those 2 short sentences. Throughout the day, I experimented while brushing my teeth. I named what I was doing. While walking to the store, I listened to English in my headphones instead of music. My mirror became a conversation partner, my diary a new place for expression. It wasn't about being fluent yet. It was about weaving English into the fabric of my daily life, slowly. I began to sense that learning wasn't the same as living. At first, English still felt distant, like a stranger who visited only during school tests or formal lessons. I remembered memorizing long vocabulary lists, words that slipped away because I never used them. I remembered studying conditional sentences and passive voice that had no place in my daily conversations. Every attempt felt cold, mechanical, and far from my emotions. But one day, I saw a child speaking English happily, imperfectly, yet without fear. He was laughing, playing, making mistakes, and not caring at all. The truth hit me. He wasn't studying English. He was living with it. In that instant, I understood the key. English would never feel like mine if I kept treating it like a distant subject. It had to become part of my inner world, not just something outside of me. So I made a decision. I would no longer wait for the right time, the right course, or the perfect teacher. I would bring English into my life every day, in every small way possible. It didn't matter if it was just 5 minutes while brushing my teeth or 1 sentence before sleep. What mattered was consistency. Even one small act of English each day would carve a path, just like drops of water slowly cutting stone. That decision changed everything. Instead of saying, "I'll study later," I began asking myself, "How will I live with English today?" Sometimes it meant whispering affirmations in the morning. Sometimes it meant listening to a short podcast while cooking. Sometimes it meant describing the sky out my window in simple words. And though each action was small, together they created something big, a habit, a rhythm, a sense of belonging. Of course, there were days when I felt lazy, when my mind resisted, when nothing seemed to flow. In the past, I would have stopped altogether. But now, I reminded myself that missing a day wasn't failure, it was only a pause. What mattered was returning the next day, slowly. This consistency built my confidence. I stopped being the kind of learner who studied intensely for a week and then quit for a month. I became steady, daily, reliable to myself. And every time I whispered a simple English sentence in the morning, it felt like greeting a friend at sunrise. I discovered something else as well. English wasn't only about words, it was about presence. It wasn't about perfection, but about honesty. I didn't need big, complicated phrases. I needed simple, real sentences that expressed my life as it was. Saying "I am tired" or "I feel happy" carried more truth than any advanced grammar structure. And truth is powerful. It connects, it stays, it grows, bit by bit. English was no longer a stranger in my life. It was becoming a voice I could trust, a companion in my thoughts, a reflection of who I was becoming. Looking back, I realized the biggest shift was not external but internal. I stopped waiting for permission. I gave myself the freedom to make mistakes, to be imperfect, to start small, and in doing so, I opened the door to a new world, a world where English was not outside of me, but within me, woven into the small, ordinary moments of my day. The most powerful transformation came when I began talking to myself. At first, it felt awkward, even foolish. I would glance around to make sure no one was listening before whispering sentences like, "I am sitting. I am drinking tea. The window is open." They were simple phrases, but every time I spoke them aloud, something shifted inside me. I was no longer just reading or listening. I was living in the language. I remember walking through my room one evening, narrating my actions softly to myself. I am brushing my teeth. I am closing the door. I am tired. But I will try again tomorrow. It was clumsy at first. Yet soon those small whispers grew into longer thoughts, and I realized that for the first time. I was thinking in English without forcing it. The mirror became my greatest ally. Standing in front of my reflection, I saw not just a learner but a person trying to find her voice. Some mornings, I looked at myself and said, "You can do this." Other days, I confessed, "I feel lazy today," or "I am nervous." Speaking to my own eyes gave me courage. The mirror never judged me, never corrected me, never laughed. It only reflected my effort. And that quiet acceptance gave me strength. The more I practiced, the more expressive I became, adding gestures, smiles, and even jokes. What started as awkward muttering soon grew into real conversations with myself. And in those conversations, my confidence was born. I discovered the magic of repetition, too. One night, after feeling stuck and slow, I remembered advice I had once heard. Don't learn 100 sentences, repeat one sentence 100 times. So I chose a phrase, I believe in myself. I said it again and again, whispering, singing, shouting, repeating until my mouth and tongue no longer hesitated. By the end of that night, it was no longer a phrase, it was part of me. Later, I did the same with other sentences. I will try again. English is my friend. Today is a new day. Each sentence became a tool I could use anywhere. Repetition gave me fluency not through memorization, but through rhythm, emotion, and trust. My phone also became my classroom. One evening, I changed its language to English. Suddenly, my daily device began teaching me words I had never studied. Snooze, reminder, download. Update, these were no longer words from a dictionary. They were actions I lived every day, without even realizing it. I was building vocabulary through daily habits. Every time I opened an app or adjusted my settings, I absorbed new words naturally, soon. I extended this change to my social media, my browser, my playlists. English was no longer just a subject I studied, it became the environment I lived in. Listening was another breakthrough. I loved music. But one day I replaced some of my favorite songs with short English podcasts and motivational talks. At first, I struggled. I didn't catch every word. But I kept listening as the voices washed over me. Slowly, patterns began to appear. How are you? What do you mean I don't know? These small phrases became familiar through repetition, not study. Listening trained my ears in ways textbooks never could. I even played English while cooking or lying in bed, letting my brain soak in the rhythm and melody of the language. With time, I realized that listening wasn't just about words, it was about feeling. A soft sorry, a cheerful wow, a gentle thank you, they carried emotions that stayed in my heart longer than any grammar rule ever had. There came a rainy evening when I made another bold decision, to watch a movie without subtitles. For years, I had depended on those lines at the bottom of the screen, reading instead of listening. Turning them off felt terrifying, like removing the training wheels from a bicycle. The first few minutes were difficult, words flying past too quickly, but soon I realized I didn't need to understand every word. I understood the emotions, the body language, the tone. I laughed at jokes. I followed the story. I felt the sadness of a character's tears for the first time. I wasn't translating, I was living the movie. That experience taught me that fluency isn't about perfection. It's about connection, about trusting your ears and heart to understand meaning even when words slip away. Writing became another doorway. I bought a simple notebook and began writing short diary entries in English. The first one was only 5 sentences. Today was a slow day. I woke up late. I made tea. I listened to an English video. I feel tired, but good. It was nothing fancy. But it felt powerful because it was mine. My own life expressed in English. Soon, I wrote every day, describing my mornings, my feelings, even my sadness. When I was lonely, I wrote, I feel alone today. When I was proud, I wrote, I did well today. Writing gave me freedom. It helped me see English not as an exam, but as my second voice, a way to tell my truth. All of these habits speaking to myself, repeating sentences, listening daily, watching without subtitles, writing in my diary were small steps. But together, they built something bigger than I ever expected. English stopped being a visitor. It became family. And in that transformation, I discovered something deeper. Language is not just about grammar and vocabulary. It is about presence, honesty, and emotion. It is about using your voice, however imperfect, to connect with the world and with yourself. With time, my small steps began to reshape my entire world. I realized that learning English wasn't about distant textbooks or abstract exercises. It was about weaving the language into the very fabric of my life. I began using my mornings as a quiet ritual, a sacred space to start the day with English, before I even left my bed. I whispered one short sentence. "Today is a new chance." I repeated it softly 3 times, letting the words settle not only in my mouth, but also in my heart. Then, as I brushed my teeth, I played a short English audio. I didn't strain to understand every word. I simply let the sound wash over me. A gentle reminder that English was no longer outside of me. It was part of me. While preparing breakfast, I read a motivational quote or a headline in English, savoring the words slowly. 10 minutes of this morning habit set the tone for my entire day. But perhaps the most surprising discovery was how simple sentences became my strongest tools. For so long, I had chased big vocabulary, advanced grammar, and complicated phrases. Yet in real life, I froze whenever I needed to speak. One day, instead of trying to impress myself with difficult expressions, I simply said aloud, "I don't understand." That tiny phrase felt powerful because it was real, useful, and applicable anywhere. Soon I built a collection of such sentences. "Can you say that again? I feel tired today." "That's interesting." "How do you say this in English?" These weren't textbook phrases. They were my survival tools. Repeating them daily made them automatic. So when real conversations came, I didn't freeze. The words were already waiting on my tongue. I practiced these sentences aloud like a game, changing their forms. "I need help." "Do you need help?" "She needs help." I acted them out in front of my mirror with emotions sometimes smiling, sometimes serious, sometimes whispering like a secret. The more I repeated them, the more natural they became. Slowly, these small bricks built the foundation of my fluency. They reminded me that true communication isn't about showing off. It's about being present and honest. And then, something magical happened. English began to live in my thoughts. One afternoon, I was walking down the street when I saw a little girl running and laughing. Without planning it, my mind whispered, "She's so happy." I froze for a second, realizing that the thought had come in English, not in my native language. It was effortless, natural, and soft. That moment marked a milestone. I had begun to think in English. From then on, it happened more often. I would forget my phone and think, "Where is my phone?" I would wake up and feel, I don't want to get up yet. These small, quiet thoughts told me that English was no longer just a skill I was learning. It was becoming part of my inner world. But along this journey, one shadow always followed me: the fear of mistakes. I can still remember a painful moment when I used the wrong tense and someone laughed. It wasn't cruel, but it stayed with me for days, making me feel small. For a while, I avoided speaking, terrified of sounding foolish. But then I noticed something about children. They make mistakes constantly, yet they keep speaking. They don't carry shame. They keep trying. And that's how they grow. I realized I had to do the same. Mistakes weren't failures, they were teachers. So, I made a new rule for myself. I would not avoid mistakes. I would welcome them. I began writing them in a notebook, not with shame, but with curiosity. I go, yesterday became, I went yesterday. She don't like became, she doesn't like. Each correction was not a wound, but a step forward. The more I accepted mistakes, the freer I felt. I began speaking without fear, even when I wasn't sure of the words. To my surprise, most people didn't care about my errors. They cared that I was trying. Some even smiled and encouraged me. That encouragement was worth more than 100 grammar lessons. The more I let go of perfection, the faster I learned. I realized that even native speakers stumble, forget words, and pause mid-sentence if they could be imperfect. Why couldn't I? Instead of chasing flawless grammar, I began chasing connection. I focused less on impressing others and more on expressing myself. Slowly, English stopped being a source of anxiety and became a source of freedom. One of the most beautiful transformations came when English became not just a language, but my emotional voice. I remember one night, writing in my diary, I scribbled the sentence, "I miss someone today." Tears filled my eyes, not because the grammar was perfect, but because the words carried my true feelings. For the first time, I wasn't just learning English, I was feeling it. It became my second voice, the one I used to express emotions I sometimes couldn't even express in my own language. I whispered affirmations in English before sleep. I'm proud of myself, I'm doing well, I will try again tomorrow. Those words comforted me in a way that felt new, fresh, and alive. That was when I realized something profound. Fluency isn't about using big words or speaking without errors. Fluency is about making your words carry meaning, emotion, and truth. Even the simplest sentence, spoken honestly, has the power to connect hearts. There came a day when I lived almost entirely in English without planning it. I woke up and whispered, "Good morning. Today is a new chance." I brushed my teeth while listening to a podcast. I prepared breakfast and described every action in English. I'm boiling water, I'm cutting bread. At lunch, I read an article and repeated one sentence aloud. In the evening, I wrote in my diary about my day. I stayed with English all day, and it feels possible. It wasn't perfect, but it was powerful for the first time. I felt like I wasn't just practicing English, I was living it. Another breakthrough came when I found someone safe to speak with. For months, I had spoken only to myself. But deep down, I longed for real human connection. I was afraid of being judged. But one day, with trembling hands, I messaged a friend. "Can I practice with you sometimes, to my surprise?" They replied warmly, "Of course, I'd love to help." That first conversation was clumsy. I forgot words, laughed nervously, and paused too much. But they listened patiently. They didn't correct me harshly, they simply let me speak. That safe space became precious. Speaking with someone kind made me realize that communication isn't about being flawless. It's about being understood, about sharing a piece of yourself with another soul. Soon, small sentences I had practiced alone flowed into real conversations. When my friend asked, "How was your day?" I could answer honestly. "I feel tired today." When I didn't understand, I said, "Can you say that again?" These weren't grand, impressive statements, but they were mine, and they worked. Each successful exchange gave me courage, and one evening, my friend smiled and said, "Your English is improving." Those words almost brought me to tears. Progress is not always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet acknowledgement that reminds you how far you've come. Bit by bit, I noticed that my relationship with English was changing. I no longer needed flashcards or endless grammar drills. My life had become my classroom. Every walk, every meal, every quiet thought was an opportunity to practice. When I felt sad, I whispered, "I feel lonely." When I was proud, I told myself, "I did well today." Even my mistakes became lessons I carried with kindness. English was no longer an external subject to master, it was my second voice, alive in both my thoughts and emotions. There were moments when I almost gave up, times when confusion felt overwhelming, when progress seemed invisible. But then I remembered the truth I had discovered. Growth is like water nourishing a plant. You don't see it every second, but one day you notice the flower blooming. The first time I watched a video without subtitles and understood the meaning, I smiled at how far I had come. The first time I thought in English without translating, I knew I was crossing into a new world. Looking back now, I see clearly that fluency is not the destination. It is the journey of inviting English into every corner of your life, your mornings, your reflections, your emotions, your mistakes, and your conversations. It is not about never stumbling, but about rising each time you do. It is about speaking honestly, even if the words are simple. And perhaps the greatest lesson I've learned is this: language is not about perfection, it is about connection. A child laughing in broken English is more fluent than an adult who stays silent out of fear. The courage to speak, however imperfectly, matters more than flawless grammar. The honesty of saying, "I feel nervous," in simple English is worth more than memorizing advanced words you'll never use. So if you too are struggling to make English part of your life, remember this: you don't need to wait for the perfect teacher, the perfect course, or the perfect moment. Start now. With what you have, speak one sentence, write one thought, listen to one voice, whisper to yourself in the morning. These small steps will lead to big changes, day by day. English will stop being a stranger and will become your friend, your companion, your second voice. In the end, I learned that fluency is not measured by tests or certificates, but by the freedom to express your heart. And that freedom is built slowly, lovingly, with patience, persistence, and courage. If my story touched you, I hope you take this step today. Don't just learn English, live with it. Feel it. Make it yours. And when you do, you'll see that the real secret to fluency has always been inside you. Thank you for listening to my journey. If you found meaning here, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and leave a comment with your own experience. Let's grow together, one small step at a time.